when the Archdiocese of San Antonio, that's home, began the synodal process, now it's been almost a year and a half ago or more, I happened to sit down at a table where a lot of women like you were sitting. The DRE, the person in charge of marriage counseling, the person in charge of Eucharistic ministry, they were all at my table. And I went to that synodal conversation half-heartedly. Like, oh my God, another thing. Is it really gonna go anywhere? Like, no one ever really listens to us anyway. That's how I got there. And when they started sharing their answers to the synodal conversation, I felt something change in me. These are the women that make our local church work, that turn on the lights before, that make sure that all the books are collected from the pew, that call people when they don't show up, that visit our elderly when they're sick. And they had faith that something was changing in our church. I didn't. They did. They love our church. And that's why I said yes. All of you could be doing something else and probably have better insurance, and I don't want to talk about the salaries, and et cetera, et cetera. But why are you at the parish? Why do you keep saying yes? And when we really, really look deeper, it's because we love our church. It's because we love our church. And I want to start by saying this because I learned from a very handsome oblate priest. Then they made him a bishop, so that's what happens to them. But anyway, he said, Tere, it's not the same thing to love the church than to be proud of the church. And he said, love opens you, makes you hospitable. It makes you realize that there are things that are wrong, things that need to change, that there's sin in the church, but you can love it. Being proud of the church closes you to new ideas, to change, to other ways of thinking, to other people. So I believe you are here today because you love our church. And not this church that doesn't have a name, but the people, the families, the choir, the everyday things that make us a church. And that's why I'm here today. And my invitation for all of us, and I think is it going? No, backwards. It's not working. It makes a cute noise though. Okay. My invitation to all of us is to reflect this afternoon, what creates a culture? I think the Cardinal this morning kept saying we're talking about a culture of synodality. Not an event, not a program, not a course, not a lesson in the catechetical, not going to change the RCIA, a culture. What creates a culture? And when we think about it, culture has many definitions. It includes values. What are the values? There has to be a shared meaning. There are practices and traditions and languages. What creates culture? And the change in culture takes a long, long time. Some people say at least 5 years. at least. But the most important thing that needs to happen is that everybody needs to want to change the culture. Everybody needs to believe that we need to change the culture. And you get the privilege of showing us how. I would even say that you really need to see yourselves as the pilot program, the canary in the coal mine for the entire church in the United States, not just your diocese. You are in a privileged place to show the rest of us that a different culture for our church is possible. A different culture is possible. And you know we need it. You know we need it. Let's just get a sense of this. How many of you have members of your family that are no longer practicing Catholics or practicing anything? Raise your hands. Did you look around the room? You all know, right? Does it break your heart? And when I read the report from the Synod that went from the United States, and then the report from the World Church, and the report from everyone else, that is one of the things that came out in every synodal consultation. Our family, not just the neighbor or the lady, our family has not found in our church a place of love and welcoming that we have found. A place of meaning, a place of encounter with Jesus Christ. That's why this culture shift is so important. And it begins, as the Cardinal told us, I'm going backwards now, here we go, I gotta remember it goes this way. It begins with listening. It begins with listening. The cornerstone of the shift to a culture of synodality is listening. It's the foundation. It's the foundation. And so my first invitation to all of us this afternoon is, how is our listening? How is our listening? And I learned this because I'm a sister. I'm kind of a really bad sister, but anyway, they still invited me. When I was in the novitiate, because I'm such an extrovert, right? Most sisters are very quiet and they're really good listeners. I'm really, really bad at it. But when I was a novice, my novice director would say, this is how every novitiate conversation started. She would say, Tere, don't say anything. The first part of true listening is silence. It's just silence. And in North America, we are very uncomfortable with silence. Think about it. What's the first thing you do in the morning when you wake up? That was very honest. Not pray, not thank God I woke up. It's like, or Alexa, what time is it? That's what I do. There's very few times in our day when we're just silent. But to create a new culture, we have to start with silence. We have to start with silence. Secondly, we have to stop and think about it. We have to give ourselves pause. What did I just hear? What is being said in between the lines? What is not being said? There is no music without silence and pause. Are any of you in the music ministry here? You need silence, right? Even right before you're going to start. Silence makes music. And finally, listening, needs space. It needs space and time. And that's the shift in culture that we need. And it's very difficult. I heard a sister that said once, I don't understand why we are so proud of how busy we are. Oh my God, you have no idea how many things I have to do. My sister and I are always competing to see who is busier. There's something wrong with that culture. There's no room for introspection, for assimilation. And you know, there's no room to even feel. Sometimes the lack of space in our lives is just because we have other things that we don't want to think about. Maybe it's the loss of someone. Maybe it's an issue that is not reconciled, but space. And in the end, listening is authentic prayer. Listening is at the heart of authentic prayer, because that's the whole point of a culture of synodality. The Spirit is whispering something to the church. And to hear the whisper, you have to make the silence, you have to have space, and you have to ponder and contemplate what the Spirit is saying. Your young people have been saying things for years. For years. Are we hearing the whisper of the Spirit? So we are listening to the Spirit who's speaking. If we believe in a God who is Trinity, in a God who is communion and constant interaction and dialogue, the Spirit is at work here. Something is happening. Will we make room for it and space? So I want to start by asking you, what is your biography of listening? What is your biography of listening? When were you heard authentically? Think of a moment when you just felt heard, which also means you felt seen. When someone truly heard you. And when did you truly listen? When did you truly listen? You know, I was in leadership in my community a lot. And so as such, I thought I had to fix everything. So when a sister would come to talk to me, I would have a notebook, I would be writing it down, and already I'm thinking what we're going to do. It took me a couple of years to realize all they needed was someone to listen. And some of the things I heard were impossible to fix. I just needed to listen. And they needed to know that I was truly listening. So what is your experience of authentic listening? When were you an authentic listener? And we're going to have a little conversation at the table. And we're just going to keep practicing this afternoon. So again, like I shared this morning, we're going to listen to understand. We're going to speak from our heart. Speak to be understood. Always be open to growth, or I would say a surprise. Stay curious. Don't interrupt. Honor time and the shared voice. Use an economy of words. Take the learnings, leave the stories. There has to be some level of confidentiality in authentic conversation. And here's a question. How has listening transformed your ministry in the parish? How has listening transformed what you do in the parish? So I'll invite you for 1 minute to hold that question. My invitation is that you keep pondering on how listening. Notice how listening will build a new culture. It's not another program. It's not another activity. It's how you'll do all those things. So the synodal culture is mostly a culture. It's not a plan, a program, an activity. It's how we're going to be together. And I love this quote from Henry Nouwen. Listening is much more than allowing another to talk or waiting for a chance to respond. Listening is paying full attention to others and welcoming them into our very beings. The beauty of listening is that those who are listened to start feeling accepted, start taking our words more seriously, and discovering their true selves. So I want to offer you my reflection on 3 questions for a synodal culture. The first is who, the second is how, and the third is why. So, who? Who? And I truly believe that to become an inclusive, welcoming, participating church, we need to change our understanding of who is church. Right after we started going back to church, my parents told me in San Antonio that they didn't want to go back to our parish because we got a priest que era un regañón. He was always upset with somebody. Be silent. Don't talk to people when you come into the church. Don't leave after communion. So my mom and my dad were like, Tere, ya no queremos ir con el regañón. So we went into exile and went to another parish. And then one day, another family from the parish showed up. This time, it was Dolores, who was the coordinator of the Eucharistic ministers in the other parish. So I said, oh my goodness, this is not looking good, right? So at the end of Mass, Dolores came up to me and she was all apologetic. Oh, sister, it's not that. And I said, Dolores, you don't have to explain anything to me. She said, sister, all I want is to go to Mass to a place where I feel welcome. All I want is to go to Mass to a place where I feel welcome. You are the ones that create the welcoming church. You are the ones. The who is all of us. Now, sometimes I read a lot of stuff and sometimes I just look at the pictures. Does that happen to you? Like I used to love National Geographic because I only looked at the pictures, but when the synodal process started, I really, really loved the logo. And I love the logo because it reminded me of this picture. This is the Synod on the Amazon that many of us probably didn't notice that much, but the Amazon runs from Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, Brazil, Venezuela, and they had a synod. And one day I'm looking at my iPad and I see this picture. And I just absolutely loved it. And then I realized it was the procession at the end of a Mass in the Vatican. And if you've ever had to deal with liturgists, or any of you liturgists, you know what they say about liturgists, right? It's easier to negotiate with a terrorist than with a liturgist. And in San Antonio, Archbishop Gustavo has some very, very strict liturgists. And when I saw this picture, I said, my God, those liturgists in the Vatican were probably in the hospital with a heart attack. It's messy, it's everybody, it's chaos, but they all look very happy. The logo for the synod reminds me of that because it has 3 elements. And I invite you to just go pray with the logo. The first is very important. Gather together, everyone. Encuentro. It's all the people. Children, elderly, our clergy, sisters, families, women, everyone. Who needs to create a culture? Everyone. The second element, and I learned this later, I just thought it was just a tree or something in the sun. Well, it turns out it's the cross, the Holy Spirit, and that disc symbolizes the Eucharist. Remember, Cardinal said, rooted in word and sacrament. So it's this presence of the Trinity, of God, Spirit, Son, pushing us, leaning. Because the third element of this logo that I always pray with is that everyone is moving. Everyone is moving. But they're being moved by the Spirit. We're being pushed, even if we didn't want to. And I've always thought about this because when this whole synod started, I wondered, I was looking at Pope Francis, he's not looking any younger. And I thought, why would he start something so long that he might not be able to finish? Why start something you might not be able to finish? What was Pope Francis thinking? And over again, I think it's important to go back to the why this whole thing started. And this is what he wrote in the preparatory document, the very first one that came out. The purpose of the synod and of this consultation is not to produce documents, but to plant dreams, to draw forth prophecies and visions, allow hope to be nourished, inspire trust, bind up wounds, weave together relationships, awaken a dawn of hope, learn from one another, and create a bright resourcefulness that will enlighten minds, warm hearts, give strength to our hands. That's a church I want to belong to. That's a culture. That's your responsibility as the who of this process. So we have to remember that synodality is a way of being church. And that means we need to change our understanding of who is the church. Who is the church? So I'll ask you a question. How many of you were alive during Vatican Council II between 1962 and 1965? Raise your hand. How many of you remember, like were alive, like you're so old that you actually remember watching the news about the Vatican Council? Oh my God, Cardinal, and look at them, just those two back there. So, what we're looking at is a 60-year-old dream. See, I wasn't alive when the Vatican Council II, but a lot of my sisters were. When I was a little kid in elementary school, I learned the church is the people of God. The church is the people of God. The church is the people of God. But this is a dream that still needs time. Because the truth is, has our ecclesiology, our understanding of church really changed 60 years later? This is a picture my sisters used to learn in the Baltimore Catechism. Notice, there's Jesus, Mary, St. Peter, the Pope, a priest, a sister, and the poor brothers are behind the sisters because they could have been priests. Instead, they decided to be brothers. And then the dad, the mom, the boy, and the little girl in the back. How much of our culture is still that? How much of our understanding of church is still that? Even though it's been 60 years since we said it's the people of God. This is another picture from the Catechism. I don't know if you can see it very well, but on the left it says, this is good, marriage. And on the right, there's a sister, it says, this is better. On the left, it says, this is good, like going shopping. And on the right, it's a Franciscan, it says, this is better, the vow of poverty. Have we really changed the culture of our church? And that's why synodality is an invitation to really ask ourselves the question, do we understand ourselves as church? As a pilgrim people of God? Do we really believe it? Or do we go back to the parish and our attitudes are like that old picture? Where we don't trust our voice, our experience, our gifts, our vocation to the church. So the most important thing the Synod is asking us to do is to recognize the dignity of our baptism. Raphael Luciani, one of the most important theologians, says the essential qualification is the baptism that makes everyone co-responsible in equal dignity in the mission. We are therefore all part of the base as persons of faith who are becoming the people of God through our daily horizontal relationships. So how do we lean to find our voice as church? How do we learn to listen to all the voices in the church? And what will happen if we don't? Now you're in San Diego, not only a privileged diocese, because you've been doing synod even before it was in style. Even before anybody was talking about it, you were already doing synod. But you're also in a part of the world that is not yet experiencing what we could call the great de-churching. There's so many churches that are closing that there's even articles about what to do with them. The trust in organized religion has dropped in this country to almost 36%. We have to ask ourselves, do institutions matter? Are we noticing that something is shifting? Are we noticing? Do we believe we are the who of the church? This is from that synthesis report that appeared after the synod in October. In their immense variety, the charism of the laity represent distinct gifts to the church from the Holy Spirit. You are the hope of the synodal process. You are the who. So then I will move to the how. To the how. And just a little pandemic lesson. In San Antonio, where I live, there were these volunteers in a property where the sisters are that kept telling me that we needed a conservation easement. I said, it's complicated, it's difficult. And these group of volunteers, lay people, sisters, would go out and pull out all the invasive species. And I thought, these people are crazy. Pulling out weeds is not going to change anything. That's what I thought. Until one day, the monarch butterflies came back. In huge numbers, all over. And this little group of volunteers that worked around the different springs there had succeeded in restoring the ecosystem. And I learned with them that ecosystem is a community of interactions. All it took were a few people who consistently believed that things could be different to bring those butterflies back. That's who you are for the synodal process. You have to trust that the everyday small things you do literally laudatosificate our church. They connect us all. They connect us all. You are the ones that need to multiply the connections. You are the ones that are going to make participation a key element of the synodal culture. The first level of synodality is exercised in the local church. It has to look like you and be like you. But participation needs discernment. We collaborate and we need to discern with what spirit we are participating. For example, many in our church, our bishops and priests have asked forgiveness for the abuse crisis. But what about us? What about us when we didn't believe the people that were coming forth? There's a group of lay people that are organized so that they would also apologize, because in our communities we didn't believe victims. What about those we exclude or we're prejudiced about if we're going to participate? What about our fear of dialogue with our culture? And then we have to ask ourselves the question about participation: what has changed in our listening? You know, these are pictures from the Quinto Encuentro. And I've met all these young people that tell me, I don't want to go to any more of those things because we said what we needed and nothing happened. Nothing changed. So how have synods, assemblies, encuentros changed the way we participate and collaborate in the parish? How have they changed the culture? What is ours to do? And I finish with the third question. Why? Why do we need a synodal culture? I go back to the first part. I think because we believe. Because we believe. One time I asked a sister, I said, Corinne, well, you know, there are very few people, the churches are closing, who knows what's going to happen in the next generation? And you know what she told me? She said, Terry, it would break my heart to know that the next generation of young people are not going to know Jesus like I have. They're not going to experience the consolation of a relationship with Jesus like I have. Why? Is because we are disciples. We want to share about that relationship. We want to share that even when we're on our way to Emmaus, there's a presence. In the pandemic, a little picture saved me. And I'll share it with you and we'll stop there for a moment. One day they asked me, Sister, will you say something that gives us hope? And I'm thinking, oh my God, I don't have any hope. So I'm just like, okay, what am I going to say? And then I found this picture. It's a painting from Daniel Bono called Jesus Wept. And when I was talking to the chaplains of our healthcare ministries, I said, over and over again, people have asked me, where is God? And I found him embracing us and crying with us. Because you can see the tears in his eye. Why we need a synodal culture is very critical. It's because we believe. Because we believe.